Well, hello. Today is Thursday, March the 28th, 2024, and my name is Katherine Kowalchuck, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Responsibility Quotient podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to encourage and empower people to reclaim their personal responsibility so that they may affect change not only in their personal life, but that those changes ripple out to all areas of your life, including our civic duty as well. And as a result of the lockdowns in 2020, I've been an advocate for people to get involved and to assert their personal responsibility and autonomy and resisting the government edicts and tyranny that we face today. And I have today a very wonderful person that I have followed since the mandates came in. In fact, he was one of the only politicians, sitting politicians, that was brave enough to stand up against the government tyranny. He has quite a long history in politics, and this is former Ontario MPP Randy Hillier. He is a maverick by any measure, both as a conservative and independent representative, and he was first elected a parliamentarian in Canada in 2007. And he's the first to publicly oppose the COVID state of emergency, lockdowns, and to expose the fraudulent pandemic. He's married for 43 years to the same woman, I might add. He devotes his time and is to his family and to his farm, and is an outspoken advocate in public policy and corruption in Western Canada and Canada at large. And he's a promoter of Western Canadian values. We'll get more into what those values might be, because we seem to have lost them here in Canada these days. Randy was targeted by the state and received 25 charges for organizing no more lockdown rallies in 2020 and 2021, and is fighting 9 criminal charges right now for attending the truckers' convoy in Ottawa, and is representing himself. We are going to have a lively discussion today about politics and our legal system and the state of Canada in general. And I'd like to welcome Randy Hillier. Hi, Randy.
Good morning, Catherine, and it's wonderful to be with you. I'll just, the pronunciation, is Hillier. Even though I'm from Eastern and Central Canada, there is no French pronunciation in my name.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think a lot of us, especially out west, will appreciate that. All right. So let's get into it. So you have such an amazing background. Wikipedia, if you look up Wikipedia, is I love how they slant their review of people and have their own take on how they're going to portray you. You are quite the maverick by any stretch of the definition, and but you've been with an elected representative since 2007 in Ontario, and or you were anyway. And I have a very brief stint of experience in politics. I ran in the last provincial election for the Independence Party of Alberta. I naively thought, and maybe I'm just too cynical right now, that the way that you could change things in this country was to become a lawmaker. As some of my viewers and perhaps people will know, I'm a family law lawyer in Alberta, and I as soon as the lockdowns were happening in 2020 and the mandates were happening in 2020, I resisted all of them. I didn't comply with any of them. I didn't test myself, and I didn't do any of the things that were mandated by us, by the government. And I sued the provincial government of Alberta and the Court of Queen's Bench at the time for violating my chartered rights and freedoms, for trying to force me to wear a mask in the courtroom. That is still ongoing. And but you have a long history in advocating for people. You were big into private property rights, I understand, prior to being an elected official. And maybe you can give the viewers a background of your history, because I know you're famous for resisting and standing up for Canadians and your constituents around COVID, but you have quite an interesting history.
Well, long before I got into elected office, I myself and a few other fellows started the group, and they appointed me as the chief mouthpiece for the group, or president. It was the Lanark landowners, and our slogan was, "This land is our land, back off government." And it was clear, that was in early 2002. It was clear at that time that we were on a path to continually diminish and deprive our freedoms to own, use, and enjoy our property in rural Ontario, indeed rural Canada, much at the behest and at the motivations of urban environmentalists or the green agenda. We became a very strong group. When I left in 2007, we had 15,000 members. We had signs all across Ontario, back off government, and had closed down many government buildings with our tractor protests, with many of the highways to 401, our international borders, and indeed occupied Wellington Street and Parliament Hill for a period of time, as well as Queen's Park. So, it was obvious then that we were on a destructive path. I thought that I could drain the swamp by becoming a member of the swamp, and it was a very illuminating period of time. I didn't trust government when I got elected. I had more reason not to trust them once I was elected, and once I saw the depth of the corruption within all political parties. I was a member of the Conservative Party at the time, and there wasn't a whole lot of difference in the corruption, other than the Liberals were in power, so they were a little more effective at their corruption. But all parties are the same, and they have captured the electorate. Political parties have captured people and have distorted the meaning of representative democracy, and now give people two false choices, basically, in most in Canada, that you can either select the red team, or you can select the blue team, but nothing changes in between. So, eventually, after many years of butting heads with my caucus and my party, and the Conservatives had gotten into power, the corruption was unabated with Doug Ford. I was exposing the money behind politics, the lobbyists, the people who actually run and control our political parties, and that was too much for Doug Ford and his people. So we decided that they gave me terms, an ultimatum of what I had to do and not do to remain a member of the caucus. Those terms were wholly outrageous, and I refused. So we parted ways in March of 2019, thankfully.
Right. And so, and that had to do with, this idea, and I think what you're highlighting is that all parties are really controlled by a government whip, right?
No, it's not. It's not any of the elected people that control a political party, Catherine.
No. The parties are controlled by their own whip. So
no, the political parties are controlled by the lobbyists, by the GR.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Doug Ford or Danielle Smith in Alberta, or Justin Trudeau in Ottawa are just figureheads. You know,
Yeah.
we select the party players, the real people who run the party. You know, if you think of this as a great movie set, that Parliament is a great theatrical performance, and the premiers and the prime ministers and the opposition leaders, they are the stars of the political theater. The backbenchers, well, they're the extras. What you don't see are, like with any good production, you don't see who the producers are and who the directors are, and who writes the screenplays for them. Those are the people who control the party. They're the ones who orchestrate the nominations for leadership that ensure they get a pliable, amenable, and not so smart leader in place where they can manipulate and ensure that the people behind the scenes can fill their pockets with money, advancing legislation, and running, in essence, a protection racket uh, for their preferred clients. That's what representative democracy looks like on the ground in the caucus rooms in every province in our country.
Well, I thank you for clarifying that and correcting me because, I think a lot of people believe that they have some sort of influence because they show up every 4 years and check a box. And I think a lot of people believe that they are voting for a different party and different principles and values, etc., when when these parties are presented to us. But in reality, and we can see that so very plainly here in Alberta right now, with the policies of the Smith government. When I ran in the last election, the mantra was we have to beat the evil Rachel Notley and NDP, and she's so dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it was it was impossible for an independent candidate or a candidate running with a smaller party to gain any foothold within the machine. And that was perpetuated, that narrative was perpetuated by media. And it was also by independent or so-called independent media. I mean, we talked earlier offline about how in the last election, Ezra Levant was so scared that he had to endorse Danielle Smith as a so-called independent news media organization, which in my mind completely further delegitimized his cause in
Yeah.
my mind. But that was a very real thing, and it was a big marketing ploy, I believe, designed to just keep people within the confines of the uniparty system, which is really what we have. It's not right or left, it's not conservative anymore or liberal. It's
So
really a uniparty system where the policies are the same. And I say this because, and I'll say this to people, on X and have these conversations with so-called conservatives in the province of Alberta. And I asked them, why are Smith's policies any different and better? She wants net zero 2050. Okay, so I don't know how that's any better than 2035, other than it's 15 years later at a huge cost. She's doing carbon capture, which is ridiculous because not only is it spending billions of our tax dollars into a boondoggle based on a lie that CO2 is a pollutant, she's now on this crusade to fight for Albertans by testifying at a parliamentary committee, which is absolutely BS and not going to go anywhere because none of these committees actually do anything that results in any meaningful change.
you've got a lot there. So let's just and
Yeah.
we'll park the independent media for a moment because I think that deserves some specific mention. But there's a good example. And same with Polyev and Smith, along with 6 other premiers, are opposed. Apparently, they're opposed to the carbon tax. Now, none of them, though, are opposed to man-made climate change. They all profess that climate change is real, and that every time you and I breathe, we are exhaling pollutants of CO2 and causing the planet to warm up. But they say, well, but the carbon tax is bad. Well, if you accept the first premise that CO2 is a pollutant, then it would be justified to limit it. Of course, none of them have the balls or the backbone to say man-made climate change is a bunch of bullshit, right? And that's what it is. But if they were sincere, and I put this out in a tweet last week, the 7 provinces, along with the federal government, could amend the Constitution and prevent any government from taxing emissions, right?
Yeah.
And all Pierre Poilievre has to do is, when he is elected, and he will be elected unless some monumental, unexpected event happens in October of 2025, he could ask all the 7 premiers, Smith included, to pass a motion in their provincial legislatures calling on the federal government to preclude their jurisdiction to tax carbon emissions. And as soon as Pierre gets elected, he could then pass a similar motion in the federal parliament, and no government would then be able to tax emissions. But none of them are saying anything like that. That is a legitimate tool. It's available to all of them to initiate. And instead, we get into the political theater. And that's what they're all engaged in, these phony baloney axe to tax initiatives and stuff. They're all, they're all engaged in this phony baloney messaging that climate change is real, that more and more control needs to be applied. But the blue team is better than the red team, right? We're going to do it a little bit slower. We're going to be a little bit more thoughtful. We're not going to be engaged in the scandals and the corruption. Well, go back to Mr. Mulroney and you'll see about scandals and corruption. Go back to any political party. Doug Ford here in Ontario with his $8.5 billion Greenbelt scandal that benefited his lobbyist friends in the development industry. This is the way business works. We have our government is completely integrated with the corporate world. They are seamless. There is no space or light that between our public policies and our corporate interests. We are, I put out a little tweet about this a little while ago, that, Mussolini and Hitler would be amazed at just how seamless the integration of corporate and public policy has become. And that, of course, is the hallmark of a fascist state, where private property is allowed, but the corporate and the public integration is complete.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
Well, that's what we have. And most people are really reluctant to face that reality for whatever reason. Mostly, I think, because, and I think that COVID highlighted a lot of this, was that they're not prepared to accept the idea that anybody can be so, that our governments could be so dishonest and untrustworthy. And so they just have this like mental block, really, that they're not able to overcome. And so we've seen this creep since World War II of the socialist agenda creeping into our institutions. And right now we're at a stage where I think it's safe to say that it's like full on disguised communism / fascism that we're now living within, under this illusion of so-called democracy that they like to use as a buzzword, but really it's an empty virtue signal term.
So here's an important aspect that people need to understand. And it's true. You might not, to look at reality would be scary for most people. To actually objectively look at what's going on, it's a scary view to come to the realization that your government is dishonest, that it is corrupt, that it has no interest in your well-being or welfare, uh, that it is just a self-serving establishment that has been legitimized by your votes, or you're not voting. Um, so um, let's. Where should I?
Well, I'd like you to
Our
touch on.
government, but here's the point. The public, over my lifetime, we've seen the public continually clamor for governments to remove personal responsibility from their lives, right? Uh, Time and time again, we've seen the public going forth to politicians saying, let's not have peanut butter in the schools because little Johnny's going to die and fall over if he smells or touches peanut butter. Let's cut down. You got to cut down the walnut trees in the schoolyard because if little Johnny stumbles across a walnut, he's going to pass away. Um, every time uh, government is asked to take away personal responsibility, they will very gladly do it. Okay, so and let's go back to COVID now. And I'm not letting politicians off the hook here. Don't get me wrong, Catherine. But there's two essential elements of why this has happened. During COVID, all our provincial premiers and the federal government locked down people because people were calling for the removal of personal responsibility. People were calling for businesses to be closed. They were calling for people to be masked. They were calling for lockdowns and isolation. And governments are very willing to take away your responsibilities and therefore also take away your freedoms. Now, where government has somewhat duplicitous in this is, of course, they were part of amplifying the uncertainty, amplifying the doubts and the fear, and encouraging the media to go into a 24/7 nonstop cycle of fear. But the government was polling every day in Ontario, and I'm sure this is the same with everywhere, to see how fearful people were and what would they do to accommodate that fear, not to lessen the fear, but to accommodate the fear. And that is, there's an old saying in politics, Catherine, never let a good tragedy or crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
Right. And that's true. Whenever there is a tragedy, what comes immediately following is another legislation for that. I saw a great example of this in Ontario when I was in office. There was a tragic accident where 4 youngsters aged between 17 and 20, who were all drunk, driving a vehicle, went drove off the road, and they were killed. They died in that horrific tragedy. So immediately, Dalton McGuinty was premier at the time, and he introduced a law to ban drivers under the age of 20 from transporting anybody else under the age of 20. Now, and they had I think you're allowed to have one under that situation, and this was his solution to take advantage of this horrific tragedy to prevent my children, my 18-year-old, from going to the arena to pick up my 14-year-old after hockey, okay,
Yeah.
or to uh, uh, pick up another child from school. And now, fortunately, in that case, but it took a lot of work. Uh, but we mobilized enough people that bill didn't become law in Ontario. But that is what is really underlying this: is our political parties are captured by um, corporate interests, um, and our
Well, and probably
electorate.
others, including unions, right?
Oh,
I mean,
unions are just another business. Don't think
yeah.
that they're just another business. Uh, uh, and then we have the electorate who is captured by their this distortion of brand loyalty, that the red team is different than the orange team or the blue team. Um, and then we also have this really profound um, view within our society that government is there not to protect our rights and freedoms, not, but they're there to protect us from adversity, from hardship, from inconvenience. That this is why we, if the neighbor's dog is barking, then in our society you don't go over and talk to the neighbor. You phone up the bylaw, and you get your government to create a law that says your neighbor's dog can't bark, or his rooster, the rooster is bothering me because it crows in the morning. Let's get rid of the roosters. Um,
Yeah.
you know, let's look. We have to look deeply and thoughtfully into the mirror and to see what is wrong, why it is wrong, and if we have the courage to live free once again with responsibility. And many
Well,
Canadians don't want to.
I would agree with that. And what is a paradox about my experience with personal responsibility, is that um, the more personal responsibility you take for all things in your life, the freer you actually are, and the suffering is alleviated at that point. Continuously, and it's lessened because my experience in about this anyway is that you learn to trust yourself, you learn to trust your decisions, you become empowered, you understand the value of your human dignity as a person, vis-a-vis your role, not only within your family and in your work life, but society in general. But personal responsibility does take effort, and I see this, especially now, a generations of people really very um, willing to hand over all the decision making to their government or institutions that they have assumed have their interests. Because what I think happens is that people are projecting the idea that they are a good person, that they would not lie or deceive or swindle, that they conduct their lives in a way that is admirable, and that they project that onto the rest of society, including our institutions, which I think is very misplaced. Yet they're unable to see beyond the deception, like this deception that we've all been had veiled over us because of the powers at be, which include, and I want you to speak about what you were going to earlier about our media and independent media having an influence on this. And then I want to talk about a little bit about how these special interest groups and lobby groups and so-called advocacy groups are really veiled to control and corral people back into the uniparty system. But go ahead with the comment
So
about independent media.
So everything in nature and everything that we understand, uh, we use the adage or we use the metaphor. There's two sides of a coin, and if freedom is one side of a coin, on the opposite side of that coin is responsibility. Right? You can't have one without the other. Right? Um, and you just think of it. The extreme of not being free is to be a slave. Uh, and if you're a slave, well, somebody else is uh, uh, takes responsibility. Well, you have to get up at this time of day. You have to work this long. Somebody else makes all your decisions for you, uh, and also mets out punishment if you're. Um, uh, so that is people need to understand is that flip side of uh, of freedom and responsibility. And so if we as a public is continually demanding uh, for government to take responsibility for the outcomes, then we have to give up freedom in order to do it. And and one of my first debates in the House where this became obvious to me, I said, if we continually take responsibility away from individuals in our society, it's logical, it's deductive. If you take people's responsibility away, you will have an irresponsible society. And that's
Mhm.
what we have. Um, you can see and there's many factors on this, but the growth in the homeless uh, tent cities, the growth in uh, the safe injection sites and drug overdoses, um, the growth um, in poverty. Um, you know, we're we have a irresponsible society, and now we're even doing it with our children, of course, with things like well, you know, the child isn't responsible for not knowing whether he's a boy or a girl, and we're going to do some really nasty, terrible stuff there. Take away that person's freedom to grow up and mature and be responsible. Um, so there's a lot of elements within there that are, I would say, places where most Canadians don't want to peer under the covers and take a look at what is happening and what their role is and what their responsibility is as well. And I'll add one more um, element to that. And most people in Canada believe that their civic duty is going out once every 4 years to the ballot box. And just think
Mhm.
of that. Uh, if you want to have a healthy, vibrant, uh, responsible government, uh, or anything, if you want to have a healthy, abundant garden, you don't plant the seeds in it one day and come back 4 years later and expect to have something worthwhile. Um,
Yeah.
you know, responsible government. Part of the responsible government is the individual's responsibility to be involved. And you have to
Yeah.
be involved often, frequently, and you have to put the effort into it. If you want to have a responsible government, you yourself have to take responsibility for participating. Um,
Well, okay,
and
but let's explore that a little bit because, we both, I mean, my experience here is in Alberta, and I've seen it. People who want to get involved with politics, get on, become the nominated candidate. This has happened in the last election with the UCP party, that the constituents want a person to be the representative on the ballot, but then, the people in the head honchos in Edmonton kibosh that and install their own person. And then you've also said that, you thought that you would be able to change it from inside, and then, you got kicked out of the party in 2019 for your comments. And so, I mean, and just so you know, I mean, I was, my membership in the UCP, United Conservative Party, was revoked because I ran against them uh, in the last election, and also because I was interim leader for the Independence Party for a brief time. But now that I'm not an interim leader, I had gone back to them and I said, please reinstate my membership, because I don't really agree with the fact that you've taken away my membership in your party, kept my money, mind you, and for because I had the crime of running in the election. So it's now I have to appeal it. So it's ridiculous, right? I have to spend my time and money or resources, or my time and effort, really, to appeal this, right? And so people say, get involved, get involved. Yet,
So
yet you can't.
So there's very different ways to be involved, Catherine, and I would not encourage anybody to give a nickel to any political party, and I would exhort them to reject their memberships. Like, until these people actually start protecting our freedoms and our responsibilities and acting uh, properly, uh, people should rip up their memberships and starve them of any money. But you know, it's called a representative democracy. And just think of it this way: uh, uh, your representative is supposed to represent his or her community's interests. How many people do you think actually call up their elected representative and share with that person their thoughts, their perspectives, their views on what ought to be happening and what is their concerns and how should they be addressed? A representative can't represent people if he doesn't know what they want.
Right.
And very seldom, uh, when I was in office for 15 years, I would have the lobbyists, the special interest groups, the environmentalists, the poverty industry groups uh, banging at my door all the time. Very seldom would I have the small business owner calling up, or just anyone calling up and wanting to share their views. Then, you know, and although I uh, did everything possible to facilitate and enhance that, my doors were always open. When I wasn't in the legislature, I was in my constituency office and I would answer my phones. But most people don't do anything. Most people, so it's not just a case of running. What are you going to do? Because not everybody can be in an elected office. Um, you know, so your people's job is to send a letter, send an email, pick up the phone,
Well, but
and
at the end of
go
the
into
day,
their
though,
office and
sure,
have a
sure.
discussion. Uh, and and there's other avenues as well. There's letters to the editor. There's talk radio. There's all kinds of ways for people to express themselves. One of the problems that we're facing again is with this lack of responsibility and this growing culture of this is many people have lost sight and don't understand that there's value in them speaking out, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and they think that they are victims and helpless, and that's not true. Everybody in elected office, um, I know this for a fact. Uh, Even if they don't respond to your inquiries, you're at least informing them of your wishes and your desires. And you know, um, it's not that's the way the system is designed to function, um, and we have to do our part if we want it to function the way it's meant to be. Um, Now, And
Well,
I'm not saying that that's
how do you get rid of the special interests and the lobbyists? Because I mean, we certainly laws can be created to prevent that sort of thing, but then on the also on the flip side of it, because I mean, we can and I do think that people are powerful. We saw it with the truckers.
yeah,
Obviously, that was a massive mobilization that changed the trajectory of the
absolutely.
lockdowns for sure.
They were
So
expressing themselves.
I agree with you. And now people, including yourself, are being persecuted for this. We have political prisoners in jail, and we have so many people that have received fines and have been unlawfully confined and have spent lots and lots of money on legal fees fighting these ridiculous charges or tickets that have plagued everybody. And so we have this situation where, yes, I agree, and it does fall on the citizen, you as an individual personally, to resist and to the extent that you can. But now we have this chilling effect that's happening. Bill C-63 is on the horizon, which ostensibly it's there to protect children from pornography on the internet. Like, why don't we actually just get rid of pornography on the internet? Like,
Right?
why don't
Yeah,
we just do that?
that would be a
Wouldn't
good
that
start.
be
But how many
beneficial
people?
for society?
I know I've said that we should ban pornography on the internet. Um, but how many
Yes,
other people are saying that? Um,
I
you know,
am. I,
well, but this is, and it's not a case of getting rid of the other side, Catherine. Um,
yeah,
like, but it's a case of us on our side speaking out. And yes, what happened in Ottawa in February 2022 is a great example of what happens when people actually get involved. It was during that time that every province announced they were getting rid of the mask mandates, that they were getting rid of the curfews, that they were getting rid of the travel restrictions. You know, every government, every politician um, knows intuitively and understands their legitimacy is derived from the consent of the electorate. And, you know, if the electorate is silent, then it's acquiescence. Then they can go along and do whatever they want. Uh,
yeah,
but as soon as the people start speaking out, then they know that their legitimacy is in jeopardy and they will act. Um, you know, and you know, and all I'm saying is that not that I expect a truckers convoy every day by every person. Um, that was the culmination of 2 years of harsh restrictions and lockdowns
yeah,
and unnecessary restrictions. Um, yeah, you know, uh, but it wasn't just what the events in Ottawa. It was all those people on the overpasses, all those people's lining
mhm,
the streets. Um, and as much as the media had tried to suppress and censor dissenting voices, uh, what happened as a result in February was you couldn't hide from it. It was so big, it was so powerful. But if we did our duties uh, weekly, daily, monthly, yearly, uh, uh, that probably wouldn't have been a need to have all those trucks in Ottawa in February 2022. Maybe,
mhm,
you know, but if we, uh, when you see a government involved in suspicious or shady activity um, or corruption, you know, how many people phone up? Like, look at what happened in the Winnipeg Lab. And I just ask your audience this: how many people have sent a letter to their MP condemning the actions of what happened at the Winnipeg Lab?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
just as an example. Um, how many people sent a letter or made a phone call to their MP when during the SNC Lavalin corruption scandal?
Yeah.
Like, we have to express ourselves if we want to have good outcomes. That's why freedom of speech and freedom of expression are so, at the pinnacle of our highest laws are there to protect them. It's not so um, you and I can go to the Maple Leafs game or choose which pub that we want to go to, or uh, 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 or play a round of golf or something. It is protected, and it's at its highest level to ensure that people are free to reject evil, to reject wrongdoing, to speak out against corruption. That's why it's so uh, so protected. But we sort of have put it in the I don't even think many people understand uh, what the importance of freedom is and why
I
it is
don't
so protected.
and I think, and I agree with you, and I think, looking back on my education, certainly that was maybe just taken for granted. It was overlooked. It certainly wasn't something that was drilled into us as students. And so I see a major failing in our education system, right from kindergarten on. And then I see, our institutions, our universities being captured by an agenda that is not, it's definitely not pro-life, like pro humanity. It's in fact the opposite of that, in my opinion, and is advancing a socialist agenda that is destroying actually the moral fabric of our society. And then, so I agree with you. Like, do you think that, and I want to talk about the charges that you have, and I understand that there's a publication ban with respect to the details of your matter, but to the extent that you're able to talk about it, like, because one of my concerns is that and I'm concerned about it definitely as a citizen here in Canada, of this Bill C-63 Online Harms Act, which is going to change the definition of what is hate speech in Canada and create another bureaucracy to monitor so-called online hate, and really I think it's going to be an absolute disaster. The fact that more premiers, any premier, isn't speaking out against this and saying to Ottawa, like, no, this cannot happen. We will fight this on a constitutional level. Certainly, people like yourself, like myself, and others that we know that have been vocal and wanting to, simply ask questions or be critical of the government narrative. It's going to become, I believe, really, it's going to be dicey for us, and whether or not, and how we're seeing it within our professions. People are being, fired from their as doctors, and they're being censored as academics. And, of course, the legal profession has gone lockstep into advancing diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and promotes the truth and reconciliation stuff in this never-ending quest to reconcile for, and atone for the sins of our past that we were not even involved with. I mean, it just seems to me that while I agree with you, and I think that's a great solution, is to stop funding our political parties. I mean, that would be wonderful. And I've never heard anybody say that, but I think that would be a good first step to neuter them right where it counts in their bank account. But
It's just
it's not too late.
rejecting
It's not
evil.
too late to start. Pardon me?
No, no, it's a case of always rejecting evil, okay, and
Yeah.
not playing the games with evil. Okay. So if the political party is evil, you don't fund them, you don't participate with them, you don't encourage them, you oppose them. Yeah, I don't watch mainstream media. I have turned off all. I have unfollowed every journalist in the country. or at least I think I have. And I never repeat uh, a mainstream media story on Facebook or Twitter. Like, I am not going to give them an ounce of time because they are evil, right?
Yeah.
They are engaged in wrongdoing that is hurting us. So, that's the first thing, is just reject that evil and don't participate with it. Uh,
So some people that I engage with here, they like to placate Danielle Smith and her socialist policies, and by saying, she has to play both sides and give her time, and it's better, this brand of evil is better than what it could really be like with an NDP government. And you know I, it's
it,
really interesting that people will give a pass to this sort of nonsense, um and I
well,
and I
that's
can only go ahead.
well, that's what I meant by, the electorate is captured. They don't even understand that they're captured, and they think that, by choosing what they think is the lesser of two evils is somehow virtuous. No, it's still evil. Uh,
Yeah,
so, you know, uh, vote for independent candidates. Vote for and vote for who you think represents your values and has got a backbone and some conviction, and who's going
yeah,
to stand on them. Um, and uh, and anybody who says, well, you got to play this side or that side, like, this is all rubbish. And again, it's just phony baloney nonsense to make you believe uh, in the narrative that they're spinning. But you know, the online harms bill, we have so many cons coming. When I was down in Washington, speaking at the Senate and at the International Crisis Summit, I said to people who, when I was a young child, I would go to bed terrified and having nightmares of the looming ice age, which was one of the big apocalyptic cults of the day, and had been bought into and promoted by the academia. That one day we were going to have an ice age, and I said to people, I went to bed as a youth, terrified of the coming ice age, only to wake up as an adult into global warming. Right? It's all a con, and it's all to make you encourage you to give up your responsibilities, encourage you to get on side with evil, okay,
yeah,
and allow evil to control you. So if somebody wants their children to grow up in a free country, um, or their grandchildren, um, and to be responsible, and to have an opportunity uh, to pursue happiness, you know, they're going to have to get off the couch. They're going to have to realize that democracy is not just a little spectator sport that they can cheer for one blue team or cheer for the red team. That they have to get off the couch and actually do things.
yeah,
And it's going to take a long process to uh, encourage people to do that. But uh, until we do, we're going to have more of these cons, and we should, we brushed off some of the independent media, but we've seen this, uh, and although I think very, very highly, and there's a great many really good independent or alternative um, uh, media and people engaged is doing like what you're doing, Catherine, and speaking out and offering up opposing views. Uh, but many of the alternative media have are just small bit mainstream medias, um, wanting to follow the path of others, and um, you know we've seen there's an old adage in politics that everybody and anybody will trade their influence over politics for access to politics, right? And if you
hmm
think about that, people and businesses will trade their influence in order to gain access. And that's what we're seeing happening with some of our some of our alternative media. They want to get closer to Pierre. They want to have privileged access to Pierre or to Danielle. So they're not going to say anything that is detrimental or in opposition to the people that they want to
Yeah.
gain greater access to. And there's two reasons for that. One is that they're hoping to get a scoop, maybe, and maybe a long form interview. But they're also playing the longer game that if they're uh, uh, if they have access to Danielle and Pierre and whatnot, then they'll get more government advertising revenue that the governments will advertise on their channels. And maybe um, the owners will also get a nomination for the political party and run under that banner. Like this is what much of society has come down to. Uh, they will shed their principles to have access to power. And I will say, Daniel Smith is a good example. When she back in, I'm sure it was 2013, uh, a very powerful Wild Rose Party, an independent right side of the equation party gained significant electoral advantage. Um, and But it wasn't close enough to power for Danielle. It wasn't close enough, even though that she was the opposition. Uh, uh, she crossed the floor and
Yeah.
joined the Conservative Party because uh, conviction and principles and values are not nearly as important to her as being in power. And and I've known Danielle for a long time, and many people thought that she would be a great white knight arriving in Alberta because she had uh, shown herself to be critical of the COVID mandates um, when she wasn't in office. But you know, what has she done? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
nothing. Uh,
Well, she has, I mean, we're still, as a province, allowing the jab to be administered. The health protocol still includes giving remdesivir, which is, just
a killer.
horrible, a killer drug.
Yeah.
And not only that, the other equation, the other side of responsibility too is accountability. And I think, that's where I know a lot of people lose faith and ambition to want to change things, because we see all this theater. I mean, you went to Washington, you gave your testimony, so did other Canadians who have been speaking out. But these testimonies are given, like the National Citizens Inquiry. These things are done, yet there's no actual meaningful accountability that's levied. And one of the things that I really think we need to do here in Alberta and in Canada generally is have a robust, independent public inquiry with teeth that's committed to following the truth, and that will prosecute people who have broken the law. And the problem is that most of, or a lot of, Danielle Smith's cabinet are from the legacy government, the Kenney government that locked us all down and made business owners do things that they normally wouldn't have done, in the name of public health and keeping people safe. So it's plain to me. I mean, it's like you can put the comparisons of what needs to be done, what hasn't been done, and what won't be done, yet people are still enamored with it. I'm hoping that people, having listened to what we've talked about today, can see that there's more going on behind the scenes than what you would what you think is happening, mostly because mainstream media. But also, we have these initiatives here in Alberta anyway. um, and I think it's happening on both sides, both with the NDP. Obviously, they have their unions and they have their other special interest groups that captivate people. But on the right here in Alberta, we have Take Back Alberta, and some of these other institution or groups like Project Confederation, these places that really seem independent, but are actually they're actually corralling people back into the UCP narrative. And I call them mop ups, right? They're mopping up people, and
So,
that's what they did. Like Take Back Alberta. In Alberta, yes, we had a problem with Jason Kenney, but it goes beyond Jason Kenney. I mean, the rot, as you've already described, is well entrenched within these political parties and runs deep. And so it's not just the one person, it's the whole system. And so while that was necessary, they've now turn the focus, and there's like freedom fighting people who really want meaningful change, and really great people who want meaningful change, but now they're being they're being managed by the head of
let me
TBA.
address the two things there. So the
Yeah.
first off is every political party, whether they were in office or not, don't want an inquiry, right? Because they are also culpable. Like, in the federal parliament, Polyev was clamoring and yelling and screaming that Justin wasn't getting the jabs out into people fast enough.
Yeah.
And it's the same with all the opposition parties. The government wasn't jabbing people fast enough. And so, but how many people, before I say that, in by any measure, when a society has undergone a substantial crisis in a, how many times do we hear the term unprecedented? The COVID pandemic was unprecedented. I must have heard an unprecedented amount of times. Like this was and we took unprecedented measures, lockdowns, and confining people to their homes and denying them health care. Like, by any objective measure, Catherine, a reasonable individual or a reasonable group of individuals would then do um, uh, an evaluation of these unprecedented measures and uh, examine them, analyze them, evaluate them, and see what they did right, see what they did wrong, and they would do this if for no other reason, to learn and educate themselves. Okay, that's what we all do as individuals. When we do something, and there's a consequence, we examine and evaluate our course of action. But
Hopefully.
well, we're not going to survive as individuals if we don't do it. We're not going to
Yeah.
survive as a society if the collective doesn't do it. And but so none of these guys want to lift the covers of COVID and have people peer in, because they will find that there was negligence, that there was malfeasance, that there was dishonesty, and indeed, and I believe they'll also find criminal behavior under the covers. Uh, but I will say to you, uh, I first, Derek Sloan and I did a joint press conference after I started the Ed Lockdown Caucus in um, in 2021, and I believe it was May of 2021. Both Derek and I were still uh, elected representatives at the time, and we called for a Royal Commission of Inquiry, both at the provincial level and at the federal level. Um, I've not heard many people demanding, uh, and again, this is just one of those things. Um, uh, Sending letters saying we need to have a Royal Commission of Inquiry where an independent body can summons, can subpoena, can take testimony under oath, and is subject to uh, the penalties of law for perjury, etc. Um, and we need to do this. Some of the other countries have done it. Scotland is doing it. I know Czechoslovakia is doing it now. New Zealand is also doing it. So, um, you know, but we're not doing it. We're seeing
Yeah.
in the U.S. Senate and in the House, they're having significant congressional hearings on investigating the origins of COVID, the gain of function by Fauci, um, and uh, the overt and substantial censorship undertaken by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the CIA on our social media and mainstream media platforms during COVID. So, we have to be yelling and screaming. And if we haven't got what we want yet, all that tells us is we have to be more determined, that we have to have
Yeah.
greater perseverance. Um, because, bad guys um, uh, don't become good because bad guys keep doing bad things until they're prevented from doing bad things. Um, and we
Yeah.
have to, it's our job. That's our responsibility, is not to allow our governments who are acting in our name to do bad things on our behalf. Um,
Yeah.
and
So
those
let's
people who,
let's talk. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it really does come down to our personal responsibility, right? And we, in order to see would be the change that you want to see, you have to start from first principles, the first person, yourself. And
yeah,
but I want to hear. Let's talk about, before we conclude for today, a little bit about what's going on with your lawsuit. A lot of the charges have been dropped. There, some remain. Can you explain, and you're self-representing, because, as you mentioned privately to me, like, it's it's expensive to
yeah.
hire a lawyer, and obviously you still need to provide for your family, and and survive. And that's, the great failing of our legal system is the access to justice as well. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I will admit to that. It's not easy. I don't want to engage lawyers for that same reason. In instances in my life where I've had to. So
So,
explain to me what's happening with your legal
yeah.
battle.
So, and I should clarify, when I speak about things about institutions, yeah, and I'm going to speak about the legal institution here shortly, it should be recognized and it should be known that um, uh, I'm speaking in generalities, and there's exceptions to every rule. So,
Yeah.
when I say um, politicians are corrupt, that doesn't mean that there aren't any uh, honest ones. I'm speaking in generalities. Um,
Yeah.
but our legal system has been captured, just like every other institution. Our political institutions, our media, hell, even our library board's been captured, and now are putting drag queen shows on for
Yeah.
little kids. But um, so I had 25 provincial charges. So they are not criminal. And for people that need to provide some context here, those are not criminal. They come with substantive penalties. Um,
Yeah.
uh, a maximum of $100,000 in fines and up to a year in jail, but not criminal uh, for not abiding by the mandate. Um, so 20 of those have been withdrawn. I still have 5 of them left that I'm doing battle with. The bigger ones are these 9 criminal charges where the Crown is seeking to incarcerate me for 3.5 years for my for what I didn't do in Ottawa. uh, you know, but so this week I was at my 6th judicial pretrial. This has been going on now for 2 years, and it'll be going on for some time now. Um, I decided to represent myself in November of last year and discharged my legal counsel. Um, and just as I discharged my political party and disentangled me from political parties, I've also disentangled myself from uh, uh, legal counsel and am acting independently and self-representing. Uh, and so this week, I filed what's called an O'Connor application and a Stinchcombe application. These are recognized Supreme Court case law, which compels the Crown and others to provide all relevant information and evidence to the accused.
Which you would think would have been just like something that should have happened as part of normal course, but
it's in the Public Prosecution of Canada's service guideline that the Crown is to provide all this evidence. The problem is there is no consequence for the Crown for not doing their job. There's no penalty for the Crown for not obeying their own oath of office and their own procedures manual. So, and this is the game that criminal lawyers and the Crown play, and the Crown doesn't provide it, then it makes the criminal lawyer to do these applications. And just for people's understanding, the O'Connor application I filed is about 450 pages in length. The Stinchcombe application is about 200 pages. I had to go through about 2,000 pages of evidence on of the evidence that was disclosed to me on multiple occasions to find out what were they not giving me. Right? You can't know what they're not giving you until you sift through this. So I probably put in myself and my volunteers and people helping me out, we probably put in about 200 hours into creating these applications. And if you think, a lawyer would probably charge you a couple $100 an hour, so.
Well, probably more than that.
Or substantially more. So, but even at a minimum, 40, 50, 60,000 bucks, plus the time to argue it in court, it becomes an obstruction, an impediment to the accused. And who cares? It's just the accused. It takes some more money from the accused, drag it out. There's no consequence for the Crown for behaving inappropriately, for being negligent, for being an obstructionist. There's a huge benefit for the criminal lawyer. Well, there's more money involved here, more time. And the only one who gets screwed is the accused. And who cares about the accused in a court of law?
Right.
So, but for your audience to understand, these are Supreme Court cases. On April 23rd and April 25th now, I'll be back in court. The City of Ottawa, the Parliamentary Protective Services, the Sergeant of Arms, the Speaker of the House, and the Ottawa Police will have to bring this evidence forward to the court and either attempt to keep it hidden, which they won't be able to, or encourage the judge keep it redacted. But I'm ready for them. I'm ready to argue with them, and I think the Crown is going to be very, very surprised at what evidence has been hidden, what evidence has been redacted. Because my reading through those thousands of pages of disclosure so far, Catherine, is that first off, there is outright false and fabricated evidence included in the disclosure. There is clearly not only political motivation in the prosecution of me, but there's also political interference in the prosecution. And I'm looking forward to see what happens on April 23rd and April 25th. And it'll probably take me a little bit of time to go through all the documents that I've asked for when they get revealed to me. But and the Crown has a publication ban, so nobody's allowed into court with me. None of the media are allowed to report on this. And this is
why is this? Why what's the reasons for this publication ban?
Well, it's the same thing as like we talked about with the politicians not wanting to lift the covers and for people to see in. Because once we lift the covers, once you shine the light on things, uh,
Yeah.
there's going to be some people who are going to be very embarrassed at a minimum, uh, and maybe something else will happen. So they want the story. The story is already out in the media about how bad I am, how
Yeah.
terrible I am. They want to leave that narrative out, and they certainly don't want the evidence of their own wrongdoing to be published in the media. Um, but this is not dissimilar, I think, to see what we saw in Coots with
Yeah.
those gentlemen in Coots, where uh, you know. Uh, eventually they pled down to very insignificant charges and whatnot after spending 2 years, you know, uh, and I would say unlawful incarceration for 2 years, and facing tremendous burdens and uh, in having their freedoms completely deprived and their families put in jeopardy. Uh, I'm in a little bit better spot. I'm not going to plead down to anything, um, and but I'm not also not haven't been in jail for 2 years as well. That might put a very different shine on
Well,
light.
exactly. I just think that, it just highlights to me the cowardice of these so-called prosecutors, of our government leaders, and our police and RCMP. They're, these tough guys, and but really the fact that they're doing this to litigants, the fact that they're redacting very important information, the fact that they're not including this very important information, and the lack of transparency is just there's just no words to explain the level of cowardice that you know s- that they're shrouded in, because um and I really hope that you're successful, and I think you will be, because you know what, the truth is on your side, and I know that you have this fortitude, and you're such an inspiration for Canadians, because you've been in the trenches, you've seen the corruption, you know of the limitations, and yet here you are fighting. And I have to say that it's so disappointing what I've learned about our society, and our leaders and our governments and our institutions, and how absolutely pathetic they are. Absolutely pathetic. And I, for one, want to do whatever I can to expose this and expose the corruption, and the gross negligence and inadequacies of our system, because we don't have very much time. It's getting worse, and I mean, if we don't all level up as society, and participate wholeheartedly in our lives, and can start contributing in a meaningful way, it's not you, it's them that it's going to affect next. People are going, you watching today, me speaking today, we are going to be affected, because they have absolutely no problems advancing this evil agenda, and they're going to do whatever they can in order to silence people. But good for you for standing up and being so strong.
Well, thank you. I will say, uh, these guys are not pathetic and they're not cowardly. Um, the word that I would use, and people need to understand, these people are evil, right? And truly, um, yeah, if they were just cowards, um, that would be one thing. If they were just mediocre and pathetic, that would be something. These people are engaged in wrongdoing. They are evil. Uh, anyone, and I think that's what people need to realize is just don't accept evil. Don't. and call it out at any time. And I, uh, uh, we're, we have to fight evil. We know that historically, and I guess I would just say for your audience as well, Catherine, it would be something like this. Um, there's another old adage about nature abhors a vacuum, right? When good people remove themselves and they create that vacuum from their exodus, from their participation, um, something is going to take its place, and it won't be good people until good people get back into the public square, until good people get back into and expressing themselves in the court of public opinion. Uh, Evil will be there, and and our children and our grandchildren will pay the price for our silence and our lack of effort.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, do you see any light here?
Of course,
Trying
yeah,
to try
yeah.
to end things on a good note, or as a positive note as
People should be
possible.
positive. People should be
Yeah.
like we now know who the enemy is. We can do battle with this enemy that we see. So there's no reason not to be optimistic. Um, I wouldn't say that this is a short battle and that this is going to be a battle that is won in the next year or two. This is, but it's a battle that we have to engage in, and we know that when good people uh, uh, engage, they will be victorious and they will win.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah.
let's not be um, downtrodden or disappointed. Let's be, and let's learn how to fix things. I'll give you this. There's lots of people that want to fix what's wrong in our democracy. Uh, and like anything, yeah, before you go to fix something, you better learn how it's supposed to operate. You better learn how it functions, uh, you know, uh, before you attempt to fix it. Uh, and, uh, our society has become very willing to abdicate that role of understanding and learning. And we've become very accustomed to the convenience of just calling somebody else to fix things. Uh, give you this, most people in Canada can't even fix a flat tire, right?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, you know, if you can't fix a flat tire, you're not going to fix democracy. Uh, yeah, if you
That
think you
should
can
that
fix
should be a slogan for sure. Let's get that trending.
Well, it's that simple. If you think you can uh, pick up a phone and call CAA and get your flat tire, and you should have this, that you don't have to do anything to get back mobile. If you have that sort of view that, well, that's how you're going to fix democracy as well, it's somebody else's job. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Um, you're going to have a flat tire and you're going to be on the side of the road of democracy for a long, long time. So,
Yeah.
but learn how it works. That's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what so many people are doing. Learn how it works. Learn what you have to do to fix it, and it'll get fixed.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, we just have to I think, keep getting this information out there. And so thank you, Randy, so much for joining me today. And really what I've found very valuable is your perspective in the political realm. I mean, I think I was naive about the the ability to influence political parties at that level. It's not insurmountable. Certainly, it's not insurmountable, but I do believe that it will require the citizens of each province and of our nation to level up. And I think that as times become more challenging for people, that unfortunately, the saying goes, pain is the touchstone for change. And that's certainly how I've learned and grown in my life through adversity. My hope for humanity and for Canadians is that we don't have to hit rock bottom in order to achieve the positive results that we're all seeking and fighting for on a daily basis now. But I just want to express my gratitude to you. You were a beacon of hope during COVID, during a time where many Canadians and my family were distraught and didn't know how we were going to navigate what was happening to us. And I wish you all the best. And can you please tell people how they can support you, where they can find your information, so that we can do what we can to rally behind you?
Well, yeah, I do have a website, nomorlockdowns.ca. That people can help out. I'm at my camp here, Scuttlebutt Lodge, which I rent out. If you want to spend some time at a freedom getaway in the country, you can book the camp. And I also have a Substack. You go to my Substack, Randy Hillier, as well as all my social media platforms. And I keep people abreast as much as I can, and people can help out and assist. Yeah, listen, don't be despondent, don't be despair. You know what you got to do. Just get up in the morning and do it, and we'll get this thing fixed, and our children will have a much better future if we put in the efforts today. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll be following you. And I hope that we can maybe do this again when your matters are concluded and you're not in jail.
Right on. Okay.
Okay.
Have a lovely
Thanks,
day.
Randy. Okay. Bye-bye.